Cool. So Toby, welcome. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you very much for having me.
Not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. I think we've both earned that today. So Toby, you are the CTO for FundApps. FundApps is I think you'd say, a relatively established RegTech company that provides, my understanding, is monitoring and automated compliance solutions for financial institutions. And I've not worked in that particular space, but I can only imagine that's a kind of ever-evolving landscape and a lot of very technical, a lot of big challenges you've got to work with from a technical perspective, sort of keep up with the evolution of financial regulations and all that kind of stuff. So I thought it'd be really interesting today to delve into that and get a bit more of a steer on how you might go about doing that. You personally have been at the business for nearly 5 years now as the CTO. And you have grown the technology function to over 5 times its original size from when you joined the business. So from circa 10 people to over 50. So yeah, we thought, let's get together, let's do an episode of the podcast. And I'm sure that a lot of value to share by discussing your journey that you've been on so far with the business as a technology leader and kind of go from there. But before we delve into that and your role at FundApps in particular, it'd be great to take a bit of a trip back through time to kind of where it all began for you and sort of where it started in tech leadership. So yeah, give us an overview, if you'd be so kind, as to how it all began for you in the world of tech.
Sure thing. Well, I guess like loads of us, right? It began with an Amiga when I was a kid, and playing with all of those Amiga Basic and demos and stuff on that used to come on a floppy on the cover of a magazine, and that was sort of it for me. It was a bit of a sort of lifelong passion, if you like. I went off to uni, studied computer science, partly probably through not knowing anything better to do, but it turns out actually the tech industry was a fantastic thing to get into. After uni, got a job as a engineer, software engineer, Java. Was in a startup, funnily enough. I was there for sort of a couple of years, didn't really go anywhere. I thought, okay, let's see what the corporate world's like. It was, I think, sort of 20 years ago, the startup and corporate world was quite different. The startup scene, certainly in London, was probably nowhere near as mature as it is today. And it was more by luck than judgment I ended up in a startup in the first place anyway. So did a couple of years in a corporate environment, discovered I hated everything about it, including having to wear a suit.
You, me both.
And so sort of started looking for a way out, ended up going to, I guess, what you'd probably call a scale-up now, which was in the gaming industry. Spent a good bit of time there, nearly 10 years, and that was the place that I sort of transitioned from being a software engineer IC into a leadership role. First in a more kind of technical specialist sort of leadership, and then eventually into more what you'd call broad leadership and people leadership and function leadership. So I left there after a while, sort of feeling like I'd done everything I could do. Took a little bit of time out, and then found my way to FundApps through a chance meeting with the CTO at the time that was looking for his sort of person to take the business to the next level, and that's where I joined. I think probably actually it's almost 5 years exactly since I was in the interview process.
Right. Okay.
So it's been quite a journey. It's been a lot of fun on the way.
Absolutely. Okay, fantastic. So was it always a natural progression for you to, I speak to a lot of candidates on a daily basis that are considering which route to go down once you get to a certain level as an IC. I guess this is sort of 2 paths that seem to be carved out now. One maybe go down more the sort of principal consultant route and maybe assume more sort of pure technical leadership, but then you could move more down the sort of pastoral management route, which I guess is more of a logical step into the CTO role. So was it always a natural progression for you to move into leadership? Did you feel like something that kind of came naturally to you and something you aspired to grow into the role of a CTO?
I think I probably always aspired to grow into that role. probably like many people when they start out their career, not really knowing what it means. But you want to be the boss and all this sort of stuff, right? In your early 20s, and you're full of energy and stuff. And I think at least the way it progressed for me was sort of technology first. So it turned out I was kind of okay at writing code and okay at designing solutions and sort of communicating that and articulating that to people. And that was how I found myself moving into those sort of leadership roles and owning the solution and the delivery and all those sorts of things. So it was the people and pastoral side of it came a bit later for me. I was already sort of on the hook for sizable projects and successful fail without necessarily the people leadership side of it. And it was a bit of a shock, to be honest with you. The first time I had to really manage people and deal with the one-to-ones and all the rest of it. It is something I enjoy doing, but probably not where my core strengths are. And I'm very grateful. Certainly at FundApps, we've got some fantastic people leaders and fantastic managers, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting for me. And I think that's brilliant in terms of just putting their arms around the whole 50 engineers that we are now and building those individual career paths and stuff.
Absolutely, and I guess when you get to a certain critical mass where you've got that many people in the division, you really need that sort of, those pillars, those people you can rely on, can't you? Because there's obviously only one of you as a CTO, so how do you actually go about managing at scale whilst also being strategic and keeping an eye on the, because obviously with that many people, your job could understandably become literally people management 100% of the time, but like you said, as a CTO, you've got to always be juggling those, those balls, I guess, and keeping an eye on the future. So now you've sort of gone through that incredible journey, and I'm sure we'll delve into a little bit more about your approach of how you've grown and scaled the function. But given you've been in that role now for 5 years as the CTO, what qualities and attributes do you feel really make a strong CTO and a really revered tech leader?
Wow. I mean, that's a great question. I can tell you what worked for me.
Yeah, that's the idea.
I think what's worked for me at FundApps has been I think sort of a willingness to adapt and get stuck in, and certainly when you turn up somewhere as a CTO and there's 10 people, that's not you're going to be wearing multiple hats, and you'd be on the PagerDuty escalation, you'd be getting up at 3 a.m. and patching live infrastructure and all that kind of stuff, which is it certainly makes you feel alive. Maybe not at 6 a.m. when you're knackered, but I guess to package it up nicely, it's for me, it's always been about sort of that calmness under pressure, and also having the courage of your convictions. Whether that's a sort of a 3 a.m. emergency, and you're not quite sure whether the thing that you're going to do is going to solve the thing or reduce the infrastructure to a smoking pile of rubble, or it's a big strategic bet on what might be a multi-month or a multi-year investment. Being able to sort of take a deep breath, think a situation through sort of rationally, and honestly, it doesn't really matter if you're coming from the right point of view, but as long as you can go through those steps, make a decision, and then have the courage of your convictions to see that decision through is on it. I mean, it's served me well at FundApps, and I think probably in retrospect has served me well throughout my career, has been to have that sort of calmness, detachment when you're making the decision, and then really commit once you've made the decision, and be there to support your team as well. So you can make a hard call, and you need to be there to own the outcome, whether that's good or bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point, because I think often people, they're not looking to leaders to always get it right 100% of the time. But like I said, it's to have, sort of communicable process around why you've taken the decision that you've taken, like say having confidence, encouraging your convictions. But I always say a sign of a good leader is that sort of swan effect. I don't know if you've heard of that, but basically where calm on the surface, but underneath you're flapping 10 to the dozen. But yeah, I think that's a really good trait. And like you said, obviously being there for your people. For a lot of the CTOs I speak to, without a doubt, that's one of the things that really separates in my mind the excellent CTOs from the fairly average of those that you can feel they've got a real sense for the people they're dealing with in their team, and they realise that their success is ultimately down to the happiness and the kind of the people that they have within them. So yeah, I think great points. So let's talk a little bit about the journey you've been on then within FundApps, because like I say, it sounds like a hell of a ride going from an 8 or 9 person team to over 50 plus. So how have you gone about achieving that scale, and do you take particular approaches, replicable approaches when you go into a company to achieve that kind of scale? Talk us through your sort of process there.
I mean, look, this is the first time I've gone in and been responsible for scaling a whole team and the engineering function of a team. So I haven't had the chance to try and repeat it, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. I think the guiding principle essentially that I've followed is allowing the team and the organisation to be fluid and to be shaped by what we need to achieve, and it's essentially what I call the shape of the work. So this idea that is peddled a lot in our industry, we'll have a Spotify model and we'll have squads and we'll have all of this kind of stuff, and you can somehow cookie cut teams and an engineering function. I've really never seen that work in anything that I've been involved in. Not really work. I think you can get like 80% of the potential success, but if you really want to get 100% success, then I think you need to really think about how you're designing your organisation and by extension your software, so that it's easy to work with and it fits the shape of the work that you do. And okay. What I mean by that is, if you were punching out loads and loads of websites, for example, then you might organise in a certain way. If you're doing a huge piece of work that's really deep work, AI stuff, training models, whatever, maybe you'd organise in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think even sort of big consumer businesses, you probably can't afford to just organise every single team. It's a 2 pizza team and it's this and that, and they work in a scrum and they do all this kind of stuff, because very quickly different teams start having different specialisms, and they start or they end up with slightly different cadences, whether that's their piece of technology is faster changing or slower changing, the feedback loops are longer or shorter or whatever. And being able to organise around that context, being able to organise your people as well for how much work there is, right? Some pieces of work you can only get 2 people around. Some pieces of work you can get 50 people around. Yeah. So staying alive and flexible to that, the context being the shape of the work is I think the thing that's served us well. And if you look at our evolution over the last 4 or 5 years, you'll see that every time that we've really thought about how we're going to design the structure for the work that's on our plate right now and treated that sympathetically, we've had really, really good results. Okay. And every time we've sort of gone, oh, well, there's a playbook over there, let's just do it like that. Yeah. You start to see the cracks at the edges, because the playbook was written for a certain situation that was 80% like ours. Yeah. And so that gap is...
20% is very important, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. Like I say, a lot of companies will hear of the... it's very easy to get carried away, isn't it, when you hear of the kind of like engineering utopia of those kind of businesses like Spotify, and, you will get leaders which really like to come in with these great ideas and evangelise a particular methodology, etc. But like I said, really, I suppose a good leader in any walk of life, but I can imagine particularly in structuring teams as a CTO, there's got to be a real element of pragmatism, isn't there, around actually what's the challenge we're trying to solve here, guys, and how's best to structure the team around that.
Yeah, I mean, look, Spotify came out a few years later and said they never did it. Well, they never did it in the way it was written.
They hadn't it.
Yeah. To then have, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people running around saying we must do a Spotify model, we must work like this, and we must. It's always going to be, you're always going to be on hiding to nothing. Yeah. Some because the things that always get missed are like, well, let's organise around the things that the business sells and the things that are important to the business and all the rest of it. And so often, what actually happens is it's a reorganisation in technology, and the rest of the business doesn't understand or doesn't come along as part of that journey. So you end up with, and this is like less and safe and all those like scaling agile frameworks and stuff. And they're just putting control theatre on top of software engineering, which is not the same as civil engineering. It doesn't follow the same rules. And like as an industry, we've chosen a rubbish metaphor because everybody thinks they understand it and they don't. And the more we kind of attempt to control it and constrain it and make it fit rules that other types of work do fit, the harder it gets and the more you upset people and the more misery you bake into all of those people's working lives. And certainly up until sort of some point last year, they would vote with their feet and they would go get another job. So building a really great environment has meant that we've been able to, you know, scale that team and do it with the minimal amount of hiring, because we haven't been having to backfill loads of people. We've done that because we've created a great environment and a way of working that people really enjoy.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's a great point, because very often, you know, companies that we work with, you know, they're really bothered about this sort of front end, getting the right people, like you say, the best caliber candidates they can find in the market, but they don't really go so far as to build this kind of sustainable culture that fosters retention. So is there anything that you can speak to as to, you know, something you feel you're doing kind of unique in that sense of how you're retaining good talent within the business that would be useful to know?
I mean, sustainable is a great word, and it's something that I've personally used a load, because that sustainability, I'd probably come onto it, but sustainability you can use to mean loads of things. I think though that look at FundApps, we're incredibly lucky in that Andrew, our CEO and founder, has a background as a techie, and occasionally we'll still chuck in the odd pull request and stuff, which is only mildly terrifying. But there is a sort of an organizational level understanding of what it means to do software engineering and what it means to do some fairly difficult software engineering as well. And that improves the sympathy and the empathy between teams. But I think one of the really big things that's been helpful all the way through is the relationship with the product team. And myself and Johnny, who's the Chief Product Officer, we've always had a great relationship. We get on very well. We have very similar ideas about how product and software engineering should be done and how they should work together to generate great value for the business, and not having that tension, not having that war of them and us. The business is one of my death phrases. If people talk about, oh well, what the business want? No, we're all in the business. We're all part of the same business. We just have different jobs in it. For me, it's really important that engineers understand our job, product understand their job, the CEO understands his job, sales understand their job, but we're all trying to achieve the same outcome. And when you get that right, it makes stuff really, really easy. You've got great trust between each of the different functions. People will help you do your best, and they'll pick you up if it doesn't quite work out for some reason. But that for me has been the key is that sort of connectedness and empathy between all of the different teams and functions of the business.
Yeah.
And it makes life so much easier.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I totally agree. You know, look at some of the great cultures of the companies, clients we work with, and I think the key word is alignment. You know, everyone is aligned, and like I say, and there's that respect as well. You know, like I say, healthy respect between the different functions. I think often within technology, not casting aspersions over software engineers, but often ego can play a part in these things, and it's kind of, you know, my way's right, your way's wrong type thing with the rest of the business. But like I said, we're all in the business, and we're all here to really facilitate each other and help as a collective kind of get to that end goal. How do you then, as a CTO, bearing in mind you sort of taking this cohesive alignment approach, how do you go about creating that value for the business? You know, for them to see technology's input into the greater good of the goal.
Again, good question. So really what we focus on there is flow, really. So I'm sure people will be familiar with the Dora metrics and Accelerate and this kind of stuff. But for me, the big thing is make sure that we've got that steady flow of value and that we can point to, you know, features that have been released, projects that have been delivered, that kind of stuff. But that is constant. We shouldn't have, like, you know, feast and famine. There should be a steady stream of delivery. And we should be able to see that is hopefully improving. And actually we're working really hard to make sure that the speed at which we're getting stuff done today is only going to be better tomorrow. We're only going to be faster. And that's not easy. But that's where that sustainability idea comes in, because if you can have that conversation with the product team, with the wider organization, and put sustainability of software at the heart of what you do, then your ability to deliver value, you know, not just for like 3 months or 6 months or whatever some time box effort is, but you know, multiple years of ever increasing delivery of value, right? That's super hard to achieve.
Yeah.
But that I think is where a lot of the tech and the business sort of arguments start to crop up, because you have technologists that are like, oh, I just want to pay down all the tech debt and I just want to do this, and they lose sight of why they're doing things. Yeah. And you have business people, they're just like, well, I just want the next feature and I just want the next feature. But if you can talk about that sustainably and you can say, well, look, we can do that, we can build you those 17 things in 3 months if that's what you want, but everything else we build is going to be slower. So by Christmas, we'll be behind where you want to be. Instead, let's do it like this. And then you can speak to the engineering folks and say, yes, I know you want to go and polish all of the things, but actually, these are the business imperatives. These are the things we need to achieve to hit our growth targets and what have you. And these are the bits of technical debt that really matter, and this is how we're going to get after them. So you can have that kind of consensus, I guess, on things that really matter from both sides of the spread of opinion. Make sure that everybody are aligned on that. Make sure that everybody understands how that's going to happen, and then just use really good engineering practices. You know, CI/CD, good quality testing. You know, make sure that you get your releases out really, really frequently. You don't have many fire drills because you have incidents. You have to roll them back. Delivery is predictable. The developer experience is predictable and smooth, so people feel like they can have confidence in what they do. Yeah. Make sure that you're designing your teams and your areas of ownership so that nobody has to keep too much in their head. This is something we found. Actually, we keep finding at various points on our journey, is you reach a point where the sort of the breadth of software and systems and things that somebody has to know about is so big that they can't really get their heads around it, or especially when you're hiring new people, it takes them ages to feel productive. Yeah. And if you can reduce that so that it's kind of more head shaped, whatever your problem is, then people can feel ownership and mastery a bit quicker.
Okay.
And that means they can take sort of smart decisions. So they don't have to keep looking like a chick, like open mouth, like to a product person or whatever, to be told what to do. They can infer it. And then you're moving a million times faster because you don't have to have this chain of communication every time there's something that's ambiguous, which is all of the time in software. You can have people fill in the gaps and it will be mostly right. And if it's mostly right, then you're mostly going in the right direction, and you can tweak a few bits around the edges and you'll get to exactly where you want to go, but you're not having these huge feedback loops on the way. And it all becomes like self-sustaining, essentially.
It's really
That's what
interesting.
we're going for.
Yeah, I mean, that all sounds really logical and makes total sense. And I can see by hearing that, like I say, the kind of empowering element of what you're doing there, kind of how you've achieved that kind of scale and obviously retained good people. Quite interested to understand the kind of proactive element versus the reactive element, because I guess the regulatory landscape by its very nature is prone to constant change and constantly evolving and that kind of stuff. So how reactive do you have to be generally to changes in regulation, and how does that actually affect your product you're building? Because presumably a lot of the value in your product is automation and sort of automatically flagging, monitoring and flagging those kind of things. But yeah, when you're thinking of a lovely product roadmap and sort of working together on building out these features, and then all of a sudden a whole well of a regulatory change comes along, how do you kind of manage those reactive situations?
So at the heart of our product is a rule engine. So we use that rule engine to encode regulation. So essentially, we've decoupled the software engineering effort from the fast or the speed of regulatory change. We have a team of people, we call them regexperts, and they're sort of, surprisingly, they are great fun at parties, but they're half lawyer, half coder.
Wow, that's a chameleon.
Yeah. So and their job essentially is to read the regulations and legal opinion, and they turn that into code in a DSL that runs in our rule engine. It's that we use to sort of encode regulation, and we cover regulation from I think 105 global regulatory jurisdictions. And so they're always, at that level, there's always kind of constant change and clarifications and case law and all this sort of stuff. So they're always in there changing those things. But they don't, that speed of change is sort of decoupled from the speed of change of the product, which allows us to be a lot more strategic about where we invest from a product perspective, and whether that's a big investment in performance and reliability, or whether that's a big investment to add extra features or adjacent products or whatever. We can plan with a bit more certainty as a result, essentially because of the basic architecture of the system, which I have to give credit to James, my predecessor, and Andrew, because it was all there when I arrived, and we've just kept iterating on it and kept improving it.
Fair enough. Makes sense, yeah. I think that decoupling element obviously is absolutely key, but it sounds like, you've obviously managed to find a way to build in the predictable, reactive changes that you're going to have, and continue to build out in a strategic fashion, which is ideal. So this journey you've been on over the last 5 years, I'm sure it's very easy to sit here and look back on things now and focus on all the goods, but I'm sure along the way there's been challenges that maybe we didn't anticipate. It's part of any leader's role is to deal with those challenges like we've spoken about. So what can you identify, I guess, as some of the biggest challenges you've faced while scaling a division to the size you have, and how did you overcome those?
Again, you keep asking really good questions.
Thanks.
I think so. There's a bunch of sort of operational stuff, things break and people getting up at 3 a.m. in the morning and all that kind of stuff. But you just get through them because they're almost like tactical acute issues. The bigger stuff has been keeping the organisation kind of relevant to the wider business. I mean, obviously we've had COVID during this time as well, but that I think is a one-off. I hope.
Do I.
But I think, you know, the challenge that keeps coming back is making sure that we're at the right size and the right configuration for the work that we're doing and the ambition that we have as a business. So part of that is hiring, and you know, getting a really smooth hiring process so we can get through the sort of the candidates quickly and efficiently. You know, we've worked hard to make sure that we treat people really well in the hiring process. You know, if they're not successful, we make sure that they get good quality feedback.
Right.
It's
really important.
We like to make sure that it's a quick process, and that we're very sort of open. You know, certainly things like salary transparency on the job spec, which is I see is an increasingly important thing for people. But we've been there for a while. So it's certainly being good at hiring has been a constant challenge and something that we've had to keep working at. But I think probably more challenging and more constantly challenging is being good at retaining people and making sure that when somebody comes through the door that they have a really, really good experience, both in terms of onboarding, the work that they do, the way we behave among each other, towards each other, and make sure that team and that culture is where it needs to be. It's been a constant challenge. It's been a lot of fun. I almost don't want to call it a challenge because challenge, you know, people.
Almost has a bit of a negative connotation.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be, does it?
But it's not. But it's been the thing that's been our point of difference. I think is the culture that we've built and the team spirit that we've built, the way that people muck in and help each other. I mean, not everything is perfect. Far from it. Our onboarding could be better. Some of our processes are too slow. Some of our tests are a bit flaky. All that kind of stuff. But because we have that commitment to trying to make it sustainable, keep improving our process, keep investing time and effort into making our lives better, we're definitely seeing that go in the right direction.
Awesome. And as a CTO of a business within RegTech, what are you most excited about for the future in terms of how you feel technology can really kind of add further value to the service proposition that you guys are building?
I mean, it's a cliche to say AI, right?
It wouldn't be a podcast at the moment if we didn't mention ChatGPT in some way, shape or form.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that holds a lot of promise. I think, you know, a lot of what we do is around legal opinion and that kind of stuff, and it doesn't take a huge leap to infer some of the benefits that could come there. I think more immediately interesting is AI as a co-pilot, and the way that you can use something like ChatGPT to sort of essentially be Google and Stack Overflow on steroids for people, and the productivity boost that gives teams, especially when they're doing sort of exploratory stuff. You know, if you know how to code in a language anyway and you know all the details of the system, then you're probably already beyond what ChatGPT can do for you. But if you're building something new for the first time, if you've never used this technology before, or this set of AWS services or whatever it might be, then getting that boilerplate code and being able to sort of have it refined and not just sort of scratch your head and work out, okay, so this question that was asked on Stack Overflow was a bit like the thing that I want to, like, it will do all that for you.
Yeah.
I think that co-piloting is super interesting for engineer productivity.
I love the way you coined that productivity boost, and I think you're dead right. That's kind of in all of the uses that you know, we've been able to find so far that have really been relevant for recruitment. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's not replacing the job of a consultant. It's actually just time saving, productivity boosting, and I think that's kind of where it's got its sort of greatest value to add for people, is actually has it augments what we do on a day-to-day basis. I just think it's an unbelievable watershed moment, I think, in sort of the way we all interact with AI, isn't it? I know AI is a very it's a term that gets.
I'm sort of looking forward to the point where various people's AI assistants start. You know that thing that radio DJs used to do, where they'd phone up like 2 different takeaways and hold the phone.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a bunch of AIs doing the same thing at some point, and that might be quite good fun to see what happens there. But yeah, it's going to be. Like all of these things, it's the old hype cycle, isn't it? There's a load of excitement brewing at the moment. I'm sure there'll be some horror stories and some sort of disillusionment, but that productivity piece, that feels like something that's here to stay.
Yeah. I've got to ask, have you used it as a CTO in your role? Has there been anything in particular that you've thought, actually, do you know what, I'm gonna consult ChatGPT on this, and it sort of gives you just a perspective that you weren't necessarily thinking of before?
So I haven't asked it any questions like that, really. I have given it a road test on that productivity co-pilot idea, and that's super cool. But I haven't. It's an interesting one. Maybe I should go and ask it. What should I do about this problem and that problem? How should I organise the thing? But again, I think just knowing that the sort of training set of data it will have that. Well, what you should do is you should have a pizza team, and you should do this, and you should do that, and
not always totally context specific, is it?
I think my view is we're beyond that, and we should be. Everybody should be looking at the type of work they do and choosing the right organisation for the job. If that means you just need 2 people working on a thing, so be it. If that means 7 or 8, so be it. But please don't have 8 people standing up only talking to one person for 15 minutes every day.
Yeah.
That's just a waste.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can see just from this podcast alone, I can see one of the reasons I think you've obviously been a very successful CTO is, you seem to approach things very logically and very methodically, and I think, but also very pragmatically. And I think that is one of the better traits of a CTO that people really respect, is that, you can tell there's a thought process that's gone into everything, but it's not my way or the highway. It's actually looking at something and thinking, okay, well, what's going to be the best solution in this particular instance? And I do think that's an incredibly valuable trait of a CTO, certainly from a lot of CTOs I've spoken to. Toby, really enjoyed the chat. I think it's been an excellent episode, and I can see how you've achieved what you've achieved through speaking to you today. And I like to end every podcast in exactly the same way, which if you've listened to any before, you may know already. But I stole the idea from Rich Reed, the guy who wrote a book called If I Could Tell You One Thing, where he went around and asked a load of famous people for their one favourite bit of advice. So I'd like to do the same for you, if you'd be so kind. What's your sort of one abiding favourite piece of advice that you would like to offer your fellow humankind?
Wow. So I think conventions are there to be broken. So I'm going to give you 2 bits.
Love it. More value.
I think the first bit somebody said to me was as people we often underestimate the value of optionality. I think that's super important. So as a CTO, as an engineer, keeping your options open, deciding at the last responsible moment what you should do, I think is very, very powerful thing. And having it takes a bit of courage sometimes to not leap, but deferring a decision if you think there's a bit more information could be really, really valuable. And you don't need to leap into things with both feet quite as quick as you think you do sometimes.
Interesting. That kind of rounds the circle a little bit from what you were saying earlier about having courage in your convictions, but sort of if you can do both of those things together, I guess. So
reorgs are kind of my case in point. I think we've always, you have organisations that do the giant reorganisation, and it's every 2 years or whatever. There's a whole thing, and people somehow think that they can move everything about and put it back together differently, and then things will be better. And I think that's a very binary, all or nothing sort of approach, and actually you're probably better with like an incremental evolutionary approach to that change, because you keep your options open, and if at some point during that 2-year reorg the situation changes, you're actually able to respond much better than if you just hit it with a hammer and thing. And I guess the flip side, maybe, or another part of that is the old thing about type 1 and type 2 decisions. And obviously the more the type 2 decision, or the more you see that things are type 2 decisions and you keep them type 2 decisions, the more of that optionality you keep, and the more you're able to respond to change. And really that's what software engineering is about. You know, go back to the Agile Manifesto, it's all about being able to respond to change. So as whatever you do, as long as you're able to respond to change, whether it's the performance of the system, the shape of the work, the organisation, the deal coming in, whatever, maintaining an organisation and a software team that can respond to that is for my money, the key to being successful.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. It always amazes me when you get sort of really hard and fast sort of evangelical, agile, practitioners, when, like you say, the whole premise of agile is actually to be fluid, and it is to adapt, and it is to deal with change, and you get people that it's literally like it's got to be so disciplined to the nth degree, and it kind of flies in the face really of absolutely everything agile is all about, isn't it? Of course it's got to be practices and there's got to be processes which you follow, but I totally agree with you. The whole point is it's one of the great processes that allows for change and allows to how you adapt to that change. So makes absolute sense. Fantastic. Well, I think 2 great points to end on there. So all that remains is for me to say thank you again for coming on. Really enjoyed the chat. I think it was a great episode. And I will keep my eyes peeled for all the future successes of FundApps, and keep bossing the RegTech space as you have been doing.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No worries. Take care.
Cheers.